Greetings, everyone. It's great to be back for another year of the fabulous ARPA-E conference, where you have an intimate conversation with 3,000 people. We have with us today to talk about innovation, investment, and commitment in the areas of new energy technology and development. Stefan Blank, he's Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of BASF New Business, visiting from Germany. And William Caesar, Bill Caesar, who is President of WM Recycle America and WM Organic Growth from Waste Management. So great to have you both here. I thought I would start out with a little fun. Bill, I know you used to work for the CIA. I just want to get that out for everybody. You know, and you were a specialist on the Caucasus region. You've done a lot of studies sort of thinking about the impact on ethanol on gas prices long ago. So you've had a sort of, you know, you were the sort of intel government guy and you were involved in energy. So you're the kind of guy people write movies about. Yeah. But what made you move into this arena of thinking about investment in new areas of energy development?
So I was probably, when I was at McKinsey, I got involved in biofuels, in thinking about their viability, in thinking about different feedstocks and different technologies. And when I decided to leave the world of consulting, I looked around for opportunities that would allow me to put some of that into reality. And at Waste Management, a couple years prior to my coming on board, we had already started looking for opportunities to use municipal solid waste in one form or another, or some portion of the waste stream, as a feedstock. And there were a lot of different technologies that were out there, and this was a time when it was a little bit of the Wild West, where every PhD with a lab was trying to figure out how to make energy out of something. And a lot of them were focused on using garbage in one form or another. And that was my attraction to it.
And how many of them succeeded?
Well, I would say that there are none yet. So there are no successes. There are some that are still very much in process. Several that we have been involved in funding or working with. So the jury is still out. Typically, the challenge is not that the technology doesn't work, but the economics don't always work. You know, there's an expectation that, well, your feedstock is free or has negative value. You must be able to make this work. It's not always that simple.
So the science isn't, and we have a lot of people out here who are innovators. As I understand it, the audience is sort of 1/3 academic, 1/3 government, and 1/3 brilliant, inventors and innovators who are going to create the next big thing. And with those folks that are thinking about the next big thing, and they've got something that, science has given them some insight into a strategic leap. And I talked to you guys by phone, and we'll get to Stefan in a second. You were just very down on that. You said, they're screwed, essentially. So I'd like to hear a little more about why that guy with a brilliant insight, that woman with a really brilliant visionary moment, has just a really tough slog ahead.
Well, they're not all screwed, but a lot of them are. I mean, we were talking a little earlier about how the evolution of this conference has come full circle. And I was thinking to myself, is that the Lion King full circle? or is that another full circle? Because there's a circle of life when it comes to these technologies. Some of them are going to evolve, and they're going to adapt, and they're going to change, and you're going to figure out, and they will work. But there's a whole lot of them that won't, for one reason. It doesn't mean they shouldn't be pursued, but the expectation that all these things are going to work is certainly not an expectation that I have, and anyone who's investing in this space. The reason that you have a portfolio of investments is because you have every expectation that most of them aren't going to make it, and every hope that one or two of them will.
So Stefan, you're in the business of identifying some of these promising new technologies, promising new investment opportunities, and you too were fairly dour on the fact that there's a lot out there, but to be able to take something to that commercial level is a very, very difficult period of time. So you both represent large, very, very large firms and players in this field, but tell me what your filter is as you think about BASF's bets that it's making.
As an investor, as a venture capital arm, we are filtering simply that we want to invest into companies, into enterprises, which
I'm going to ask you to pick your mic up just here. Just a little more, and pretend you're at a soccer match.
I hope I should.
Speaking out to the last row back there.
So the selection criteria which we apply follow the business selections for BASF in general, which means in principle we only invest into companies which, if they are successful, might become a valid partner for BASF one day or might become part of our own portfolio one day. But of course, it's a selection process on the way to get there, because in the beginning it's great ideas, it's feasible sounding markets and customer needs, but when you go on in the development, you find out quite often that they don't match, they don't live up to the expectations, or they just don't develop quickly enough to become profitable early enough before it's out of money.
You told me something interesting on the phone, that BASF globally uses as much energy in 1 year as Washington, D.C. And thus you're very sensitive to the cost of energy. And so you're a user, but you're also a producer. And so it's kind of like being a hospital, I guess, where you're both the insurance company and the doctor. But in a sense, how do you discipline yourself so that you're both out there trying to find new technologies to basically sell this product and move the product and use it, but in terms of BASF, you're still, you know, a huge consumer. How do you manage those two different tensions?
It's just two different perspectives. We have a huge existing business with products for reducing energy consumptions, for sustainability and so on. We have about 9 billion of sales with products like that, for example, for weight reductions in cars. All that contributes. That's ongoing business. And of course, we want to further develop this kind of ongoing business into new areas. And the energy industry in total is full of new areas. So that's where we are very interested in that. The other part, the energy consuming end, sometimes serves as a starting point or even as an experimental area where we may find nice places to try out something in a secluded area, in a protected area. But usually the consumption is separate from the doing business for energy.
What do you see, let's get some specifics. What do you see on the horizon as the most profitable, most promising kind of new investments that you're thinking about in the energy area, that you see, you know, spring buds coming up that may be on the horizon for, that it will give insights into other people here, into how you think of the field?
We looked at the whole topic of the changing energy environment and selected those topics which we consider rely most on chemistry as an enabler, because in the end we are a chemical company and this is where our core competencies come from. And when we invest into a company, we never just do financial investments, we always match it up with a content cooperation. So it's an equity investment plus a joint development activity. So in order to make sense, it must be an area where the joint development makes sense, so where we bring something to the table. And the lead area there clearly is the batteries for mobility. Something even more, let's say, advanced or established is the wind energy. They need a lot of chemical solutions.
What's the connection between wind and chemical solutions?
If you look at these huge wind blades, they're pure chemical. I mean, this is plastic. That's high-performance plastics. Someone has to continue to develop these. And then when you go into more details, there is a lot of plastic, a lot of chemical requirements going there. Same thing with the batteries. I mean, we do have batteries. They are just not good enough yet. So I think in order to have the full potential of e-mobility really harvested, there is a lot of additional solutions needed. And this is one which we focused on and really built a business unit of its own around this by bringing together many pieces. And that's also when some of the experiments which we had over the years with young technologies and young companies really showed that you have to put together many puzzle pieces, and technology is just one of them. Making business is much more, and this is what you said before. Some of the technologies don't work, or they don't work in time, or they don't work with the other developing technologies.
Now, one of the other challenges that we see is that there are very interesting technologies which could have value, which could be used in one or another process. But in and of themselves, they aren't sufficient to create a company around. And most folks who are seeking investment in their ideas go down this path of, I'm going to build a company, and that company will one day IPO, and I'll be a rich entrepreneur. Or some large strategic player will acquire me, and I will operate as a standalone entity within that business. That may happen, but I think there are lots of other technologies that are being developed that are simply things that are going to be licensed. You're going to use them. There's not a business model around it as much as there is a very valuable piece of technology which can be used in one form or another. The developers will benefit from that, but they won't benefit in terms of being the head of a large company that is manufacturing or is producing something.
Can you talk about the, your horizon as you see what the promising new opportunities are, and maybe also what you think are, when we think about energy, and I've been doing a lot of tech conferences lately, and you think back 5-10 years and how dramatically the world has changed, how our behavior has changed, how, if you think we've got a lot of sensors embedded in our world now, wait till you see what's coming. I'm interested in what you see as dead-end things. One of the cool things to always talk to us out of big corporate guys is where did you screw up? And given past decisions. But as you look ahead, what do you see as the promising new opportunities? What do you think have been our sort of dead-end tracks when it comes to thinking about our energy future?
Well, I don't like to think about dead ends. There are things that their time hasn't come yet. So I'll take the area around organics. Lots of people would like to find useful and profitable things to do with food waste. One of the problems that we have today is that most of that food waste goes into a garbage can with everything else. And if you want to sort it out, it's expensive. And if you want to then transform it in some way, it's expensive. And we had invested in a company that was able to take food waste and through a process convert it into a green gasoline or a green diesel. The technology worked. The problem is that we needed 1,000 tons a day of clean food waste in order to supply a plant of sufficient scale to make this work. There isn't a single city in the United States today that collects 1,000 tons a day of clean food waste. That business and that company are on the shelf, right? Until some point in the future comes along.
Could you take it to Denmark? Maybe Denmark makes 1,000 tons.
If the Danes want it, I'm sure we can figure out how to get them the technology. It's just that time hasn't come.
I thought you were going to tell me glass was a dead end, because we were talking before.
But glass is not
in waste management, and this morning I separated my glass from my cans, and I've got my the soft waste, but I heard you hate glass.
Right now I do not like glass.
Yeah, we share that. I mean, I think that's the tweetable moment here.
My friends at Owens, Illinois will love to see it again.
Yeah.
The problem with glass is that, as I was telling Stefan earlier, in the United States, with the exception of very few communities, glass is commingled with other recyclables. And when you separate it out, it not only does it have contamination in it, but it's been mixed, the colors have been mixed. And it's very expensive to pull it apart. There is a great market for cullet, and if the guys from OI were here, they would tell you that they would buy, every ton of glass that I could sell them, but they won't pay me more than it costs them to pull out the materials, virgin materials out of the ground and ship them across the country. And so I have a cap on what I can afford to spend to do this. But I constantly look for opportunities with glass. What we have today isn't working for me. And I was just telling Stefan, the new headquarters of BASF in New Jersey has an outdoor area, and instead of using concrete to pave it, they used a permeable glass structure that uses a binder that BASF produces. And what this does is it allows the water to flow through it. It's a hard surface. You can walk on it. It's not sharp pieces of glass that would cut your foot. But it's permeable, which means you don't have water runoff. It's a wonderful thing. It's just that it's not cheap.
But what your example also showed with the glass, in a lot of topics around the energy industry, it comes to the necessity for a massive infrastructure before the final technology actually can work.
Right.
And that's my experience. Quite often, this infrastructure is not there, or it turns out it will not be there as early as assumed. And therefore, the technology just has to start from different starting conditions, and suddenly the whole economic assumptions break apart.
Right.
And that's a problem for any investor.
Right. There's a company that both BASF and Waste Management have invested in, which is a company that is going to create industrial sugars from, let's call it, fiber and biomass. The technology is moving along, but behind that, and for anyone who's involved in any part of biofuels understands that, yeah, we may be able to figure out how to ferment the stuff or how to otherwise produce ethanol out of this biomass, but how do I get all that biomass to the plant every day in the right quantity, in the right condition? And that's a challenge with some of these technologies. It's not that I can't transform it. It's that I have to get so much of it to the same place every day of the year if I want to be successful economically.
You know, one of the things that I think would be fun to hear from both of you, and we've got an audience here, many of whom have been to the ARPA-E conference. This is the 5th year the ARPA-E conference has been held. A lot of the investments and partnerships ARPA-E has invested in are beginning to come to fruition now. I sort of was nasty with them in the back room, and I said, well, have you invented your version of the internet yet? So maybe that's out there. But what they're really doing is leveraging partnerships and thinking about, you know, what is the role in a way for the government in partnership with the private sector, in partnership with academia and innovators and finance? What is the healthy ecosystem for development? And as large business players in this, I'm interested in your perspective. Do you look at what a government arm leveraging with, in fact, many small innovators are doing, or trying to incentivize a certain kind of area of research? Can you give us a sort of take on whether you see deficits in the ecosystem that need to be addressed? How do you look at the small players out there? Are you sort of selfishly just grabbing, you know, the best things out there and letting a lot of other things fall? I want you to kind of come out of your shells for a minute as big corporate types and give us your view of the world.
Of course, we choose any kind of investment into a young startup company according to our specific selection criteria. That's obvious. Part of these selection criteria is what we believe about the future economic success of such a company. As I mentioned before, another part is the technology selection, the business fit with what we see as our long-term direction. But I think it's important to say that we do rely and we do need that kind of partnerships. So we don't see it as our responsibility that enough of those startups actually come up. And we also cannot shape the topics in which they will come up. That's largely driven by academia, by the entrepreneurship of the young people. But I think there is also a role for the government, especially in this kind of topics in the energy field here, and this is what ARPA-E does so great. What's been your best bet that you've made, the best investment decision you made from an outside company bringing something into BASF? That's something which is only remotely related to energy. It was a technology for steam cracking, so for converting oil, if you want so, into small molecules. And it was a technology which improves the productivity of the steam cracking units. We found that, we invested, and less than a year later we acquired the whole company because it was doing so greatly. And how about waste management?
I'm still waiting.
You're still waiting?
I'm still waiting. I've been responsible for our portfolio of investments in early stage technology companies for about a year and a half. And I've been more focused on managing the ones that haven't been successful and continuing to provide support to the ones that are moving in the right direction than I have been championing the success, because we're still waiting for a couple of the things that we think are going to be successful to get there. But I tell you what, it is a lot of work managing a portfolio of companies where you have a lot of positive things, but things don't happen as quickly as you thought they were going to happen. And you spend a lot more money than you think you were going to spend. And the other entities that you need in order to help your entity be successful either change their minds or go do something else. So generally, when Waste Management invests in something, we're not doing it alone. We're typically doing it both with other corporates as well as with venture capitalists. And that way, to some extent, we're trying to invest with smart money. We're trying to do things where we're not the only ones that have convinced ourselves that this thing is terrific, that other people have also done the same things and have put their money where their mouths are. And that's how we manage the risk. But you know, I hope at this time next year, if you were to ask me the same question, there are a couple different entities I could point to.
I mean, are you, let me ask you an unfair question. Are you innovating fast enough? You know, it occurs to me that last year on stage, I had the privilege of talking with Elon Musk and Stephen Chu. And so you had, you know, Secretary of Energy and, you know, one of the great innovators and entrepreneurs of our time. I'm in the Elon Musk fan club, and I think that when you look at just the sheer, you know, vision and pace at which he's brought new things on, and you look at the resources and talent embedded in other large firms, you know, it sort of stands as a foil, like, why can't everybody be, you know, doing what he's doing? What do you think is inhibiting some of the large firms to roll the dice on some of the opportunities? Is the tendency to avoid risk so high that it slows down the rate of innovation and growth?
I think what you see in both BASF and Waste Management is an effort to seed that entrepreneurship and that development outside of the corporation. I mean, we are working with entities that are third-party entities that are doing what they do. We're not buying them and bringing them into the fold and hoping that they're successful within that corporate culture. We're keeping them separate. We're letting them do what they do. So in that sense, there isn't a barrier to the development of these technologies within a Waste Management or a BASF. We're keeping them outside, both in an effort to prevent that from happening, but also because those entities don't want to be inside us. And we don't want them to be inside us either. So we'll let them do what they do outside, and we will help them, nourish them, bring some of the technology, a lot of the business acumen that they need to see if these things can actually become commercial scale.
Stefan, was my framing fair? I mean, one thing, we put Elon Musk on our cover of the Atlantic. What would it take for us to put Stefan Blank on the cover of the Atlantic?
I guess that's impossible. Because by definition, in any major corporation, you work in separate segments, and only bringing together the whole thing creates the success. And that's where Elon Musk is such a great exception. And all the young companies strive to find something and do something like he did. But in most cases, you're either not at the perfect timing or you need other pieces together. And then is when the big companies actually bring their strength to the table. Then it's when managing complex systems and building more complex puzzles that work jointly becomes important. And then the next step is to make that work efficiently. And I think efficiency is something which is a strength of any major corporation. And efficiency is something you do not want to impose early on onto an inventor. He should do the right things and not do them all perfectly optimized. And that's why I think really the two worlds work best when they come together. And that's the challenge that we have to do. We have to bring them together from our end, and we're always happy when we find open ears on the other side, on the young inventors, that they also accept that, yes, there is something beyond the invention and beyond the technology development. We also have to explain to them sometimes the ugly realities of the business out there. And not everybody likes to hear that. But when you bring that together, then success can also come.
I think it's more about discipline at some level. We as corporations are disciplined because we we represent our shareholders, and we are responsible to them for the investments that we make. This isn't my personal money. This is money that I otherwise could be dividending out to my investors, and if I don't spend it well, they're going to ask me why, and if I don't give them a good answer, they're going to find someone else who will. At some point, you need to impose that discipline. You can't just pour money into something in the hopes that someday it will turn around. You have to make hard calls. It's not easy, but it is the way things work at some point in time.
What do you guys think about the role that ARPA-E plays in the energy space? Is it a vital role? If ARPA-E disappeared tomorrow, would you sense there was a deficit out there in the system, or do you think the system would largely adapt? They're going to hate me for asking that question, but it's what I'm here to do. But I sense that it plays a vital role, that it's filling a gap. But I'm interested in whether you feel that way.
So I won't pander to the crowd, but
yeah.
I think there is value in having an entity which maybe is not commercially motivated to seed technologies that otherwise might not meet a market level of
So there's a patient money problem out there.
Well, there's very much a patient money problem.
Yeah.
There's also a crazy ass idea problem, right? Where you're not going to get money, and it is great that somebody is willing to put money into those things that maybe have a very low likelihood of success, but if they are successful, it's a great thing, not just for that entity, but for society.
Stefan?
I fully share that view. Of course, nobody's irreplaceable, but I do think that ARPA-E is really filling a void, which is good that it's filled.
Just as we wrap up in the next couple of minutes, the thing that I think would be most valuable to this audience is to think through, if you were sitting in their shoes and you were an innovator, you had a small business, you were partnered with ARPA-E, or you were looking to get ahead, what advice and counsel would you give them to maximize their situation? So take yourselves out of your hats as a large corporation and put yourself in as a player who's trying to make it in this business and transform technologically or from a business design some innovative element of this landscape. Let me start with you, Phil.
I would say surround yourself with smart people in multiple disciplines. Whatever it is that you do, you probably know it better than anyone in the world, but there are a lot of other things related to what you do and related to the business of what you do. And bring in people who've done similar things before, bring in people who are familiar with whatever space you're doing, and leverage them, because it is very, very hard for any one individual to be able to do all those things. And there are a lot of people who are interested in helping you. Find them. And find a way to leverage what they know.
And should they be approaching people like you at large firms?
They do all the time. Oh. I don't have to.
Are you expecting that to happen here?
I suspect some people.
You're going to be hanging out. You have a lot of business cards. Right? I
didn't bring any of my cards today.
I have his email address. No.
But people can find me.
Stefan?
I think to add what he said is keep in mind what is the customer need. Sometimes when the technology really is around a great idea, there's a tendency to get dragged away with the technology challenges, but keep in mind what is the customer need, and sometimes good is good enough to serve the customer need. And then the economic side of the whole problem, in many cases, may be much easier to solve than it looks.
But is it, I know we're being cut off here, but what does that mean? I mean, do customers today really know what's coming next? I get the sense things are changing so rapidly, we're going to be taught what we think we need. Am I wrong about that?
We're not dealing in consumer electronics here. All right? Our things do move a little bit slower at a pace that I think we can manage. Certainly the waste industry, while it is evolving and it is changing, they're not coming out with a new trash can every 6 months that you have to sign up for. So.
Right. Any last thoughts, Stefan?
No, I think it is something that can be managed, and that actually can, if you understand the whole surrounding, looking at smart people which you assemble, you may come to a whole universe beyond the specific technology, and that is what you have to keep in mind as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, if anybody out there has an answer on glass, I want you to email me. I'm going to get to Bill Caesar, but give a round of applause to Bill Caesar of Waste Management and Stefan Blank of BASF. Thank you very much for both being here.